Hello, this is vlog number 4, where I will share all the information I learned from week number 5, and during week 5 we're asked to read chapter 12 of the Rhetorical Act, as well as the paired readings from chapter 7 of Reading Pop Culture. So to start off, chapter 12 of the Rhetorical Act is titled Understanding Visual Rhetoric. This chapter examines the characteristics and constraints of analyzing visual rhetorical acts. So, for example, that could be political and religious symbols, smartphone apps, print ads, newspapers, architecture, dance, parades, billboards, etc. The book mentions that to successfully critique visual messages that magnify the visual and minimize the verbal requires a few things. It requires the knowledge of the visual principles, the production techniques, and how they connect to the elements of descriptive analysis, as well as the problems that this type of rhetoric poses for evaluation. So, to start off, the three principles of visual rhetoric is, first, visual messages are persuasive and they threaten to eclipse the influence of the spoken and written word in the 21st century. Essentially, what I mean by that is visual rhetoric is powerful. It affects the whole range of our activities in public life, how we see, how we remember, how we memorialize, confront, resist, consume, commodify, govern, and authorize. It is vital to creating national identity and collective memory. The second principle is that visual messages are volatile. They elicit positive and negative responses simultaneously. What I mean is visual messages are ambivalent, complex, and unstable articulations that account for the elasticity of making connections and assigning meaning. So, for example, the phrases seeing is believing and a picture is worth 1,000 words, those relate to this principle. The third and last principle is that visual messages are efficient, emotional, and enigmatic in the way that they persuade. In other words, we can grasp images quickly and process the ideas that they suggest with great efficiency. So I'm going to show the examples that this book has. All of these examples are examples of visual rhetoric, and they all follow these three principles. The next topic in this chapter is that visual messages and elements of descriptive analysis. So to understand the rhetorical force of a visual's purpose, audience, tone, persona, structure, evidence, and strategies, one must understand the basic elements of visual communication and technical elements of a camera. So the book mentions 4 paired elements that compose the core of visual messages. The first one is figure and ground. To understand a visual's purpose, we must determine the relationship between the subject and the background. The second one is shapes and space. There are 3 shapes, square, triangle, and circle, and they all conjure up distinct emotions. So for example, square represents honesty and straightness. Triangle represents conflict and action, for example, like a love triangle. And circle represents warmth and security. The third one is balance and direction. So this has perceptual cues, and they help organize a visual. So for example, symmetrical. Symmetrical implies formality and comfort. Asymmetrical implies informality and dissonance. The last one is color and lighting. So for example, color and lighting, they both affect the mood and contribute to how visuals create virtual experience, a concept that we talked about in previous vlogs. There are also more specialized technical features of visual rhetorics that include, for example, focus, angle, shot sequences, and movement, editing, and sound. And that is pretty much all that was mentioned in chapter 12 of the visual rhetoric. So I'm going to move on to the paired readings of chapter 7 in Reading Pop Culture. And just to remind you, the title of chapter 7 is Immersive Media, Can We Get Lost and Can We Be Found in Media? And this chapter basically it talks about the strong distrust of imaginative fictions and entertainments that runs through the history of our American literature and culture. So, for example, our love of vicarious distraction contradicts the value that we have towards authenticity and truth. And the book mentions that all of the essays in this chapter address the value of fiction and vicarious experience, as well connecting it to pop culture. So specifically, the paired readings in the back of chapter 7, they affirm the importance and power of comic book superheroes to help young readers understand their identity, to help them manage personal transformation, and to invite them into the world of story. So the first essay by Jones, which is titled "Violent Media is Good for Kids," argues that pop culture violence can be more beneficial than people realize, especially for young adults and children. And this is because every aspect of even the trashiest pop culture story can have its own development function. In the second essay by Chabon, which is titled "Secret Skin, an Essay in Unitard Theory," Chabon analyzes the paradoxical meaning of a superhero costume, noting that, like the being who wears it, the superhero costume is by definition an impossible object. In other words, we must remove the masks, the capes, the boots, because the superheroic wardrobe resembles a widely permutable alphabet of ideograms conceived only to express the eloquent power of silence. And with that being said, it was a very short chapter. There were only 2 paired readings, so that is pretty much it that was mentioned in Reading Pop Culture, and that is going to conclude this vlog. Thank you.